Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Moldova is heading into elections under extraordinary pressure. The Institute for the Study of War warns that Russia is training Moldovans to stage provocations and even to remove President Maia Sandu from power. Sandu herself has revealed attempts to smuggle drone parts into Transnistria, while the EU highlights an unprecedented disinformation campaign targeting the country. With fragile economic recovery, high energy costs and rural poverty, Moldova faces a pivotal moment. Joining us to explore this is Matthew Day, senior online editor at TVP World. Matthew, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
So give us a bit of background here. What's going on? We've got the parliamentary elections on Sunday. We hear about Russian disinformation campaigns going on, Maia Sandu's position being at risk. Bring it all together for us.
Well, you have these elections, and the elections are crucial maybe in two ways. First of all, they're crucial for Moldova, because if Maia Sandu's party can achieve a victory, which it may not do, of course, then that will help take Moldova further along the road to European integration, and that should also enhance the country's stability. That's crucial. It is also crucial for the broader region, because, say, if Moldova gets a hung parliament and you have political instability within Moldova, this could allow Russia to have a greater influence in Moldova. Of course, you bear in mind that Moldova sits next door to Ukraine, it sits next door to the EU in Romania, and that will provide basically a springboard for Russian influence and also quite possibly military activity into Ukraine at the worst case scenario. So you have, these elections are crucial for Moldova, but also for that area of Southeast Europe.
So that's why Russia's so interested in influencing this election. Now, the Institute for the Study of War is talking about, Moldovans being trained by Russian agents for violent protests and so on. How bad could it get, in your opinion?
Well, the ISW is a very credible think tank, so if they are claiming that, then I think there is, those claims have a lot of substance behind them. They are credible. And these protests maybe were trying to create enough unrest in the country to overthrow the president. But I think it's just part of of a broader campaign to cause confusion within Moldova, to disrupt the democratic process within Moldova, and to challenge the credibility of democratic institutions, such as the president. And if you can foment discord, if you can foment problems in Moldova, and that's good news for Russia in any way, even if it's quite minor, or even, as I said, in the worst case scenario, when you could actually maybe getting Moldova to flip and it becomes almost like a Belarus of the south, or even possibly like a Georgia as well.
Right.
This Georgia scenario where a country that was on the democratic process going towards the EU suddenly dragged away back and goes back under Russian influence.
Right. Actually, we have a soundbite, I believe, of President Sandu talking about exactly this, the hybrid war that she's accusing Russia of waging against that country. I think that should be coming up.
Russia has unleashed its full arsenal of hybrid attacks against us. The battlefield is our elections. Today we face an unlimited hybrid war on a scale unseen before the full invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin's goal is clear: to capture Moldova through the ballot box, to use it against Ukraine, and to turn us into a launchpad for hybrid attacks in the European Union. That is why this election is very important. By defending it, we protect not only Moldova, but also regional security and stability.
So she's talking about many of the things you've already mentioned. So the vote buying, the influence over the voters in terms of training them for violent protest, but also for people who are living outside Moldova, who are have the right to vote, and who are also sending remittances into Moldova, which are important because of Moldova's economic profile. All of them are being targeted. Now, let's talk for a few minutes about Moldova's economy and how vulnerable it is in this scenario.
I think it's very important not to overlook the economic situation Moldova faces. As the foreign press, sometimes we tend to focus in on the high politics, the regional politics, and we forget the day-to-day issues that people face. And Moldova, I believe, is Europe's poorest country. The average monthly salary is around about 700, 800 euros, which is tiny. I think the average EU salary is over 3,000 euros a month. And if you're a teacher, you could be earning like 600 euros a month. And these are, people are acutely aware of just how poor they are.
Right.
And they want a government that's going to make progress on this. And apparently, like the current government has failed to deal with a lot of these pressing economic issues, and therefore that's one of the reasons why it might lose its majority, or it even might lose the election. I've been to Moldova, and it is quite shocking if you go out into the countryside. You go to villages, and these villages are basically bereft of their young adult population. All you have are children and the grandparents, because all the young adults, the parents, they've left the country. They've gone to work in the EU, they've gone to Romania, they've gone to Italy, they've gone to Germany. And when you have a country in that facing those kind of problems and these challenges, governments, they'll be punished if they don't act, and also makes them very vulnerable to exploitation as well. So if you have vote buying in a very poor country, then yes, voter influence. Now, we've got Russia on one side doing all of this. Moldova's on the path to EU accession. By a slim margin, the population voted for joining the EU. Isn't there something that the EU could and should be doing to counteract this? Well, the EU has been trying to enhance the strength of Moldova's democratic institutions. It's also its court system, its justice system, the police. You can invest in these, but at the same time, I don't think the EU has the same sort of tools and the capacity that Russia has, because Russia is going to use nefarious means and is going to spend an absolute fortune on trying to undermine all that the EU can do. And the EU, of course, its attention is spread here and there. Its attention is in Ukraine. Its attention is countering the Russian threat in the Baltic states. So the EU has a lot on its plate, while I'm pretty sure that Russia now is heavily focused on making sure it can do its best to cause disruption come these elections.
Right. So EU seems to have its hands tied. As you say, it's got a lot on its plate. But then so does Russia. I mean, they're in the middle of a war against Ukraine, which they're not doing terribly well at winning. But why is... You mentioned the geopolitical implications of the location of Moldova. It's right on the border with the European Union. It could be a launch pad for Ukraine. They're talking about producing drones in the Transnistria region. So we can understand the importance of Moldova to Russia. But is it not also that Russia, Putin in particular, wants to reverse the breakup of the Soviet Union, because Moldova was, after all, a Soviet state?
Well, there are people who say that Moldova is a target. Of course, it has, you Ukraine stands in the way between Russia and Moldova, thank God, at least for the time being. But Moldova's small, it's highly polarized, it's got a certain amount of ethnic divisions, and of course you have the breakaway region of Transnistria, which actually has Russian peacekeeping troops in it right now. They've been there for decades.
Keeping the peace for what? Where's the war?
Yeah. Well, they're there for, it's a long-standing agreement because you did have this sort of very minor war back in 92, was it? I can't actually remember exactly, between Moldova and Transnistrian separatists. Russia was a power broker at the time, and these Russian troops have been there for donkey's years. And they are a vehicle of Russian influence in that region. Even if everything went well for the West and for Maia Sandu, the election was won, and Moldova carries on the path to EU membership, you're still going to have a country with Russian troops in it. And that can cause all kinds of problems when it comes to getting agreements done and trying to make sure that Moldova does actually join the EU at a date which is not a million miles away. So, I don't think, while in Vladimir's dreams when he's curled up in his Kremlin bed at night, he probably does want Moldova back under the banner of the Russian flag. But I don't think it's going to happen, but he's perfectly aware that he can really muck things around, not just for Moldova, but also for southeastern Europe.
Well, what you described in Transnistria, it sounds exactly like out of Putin's playbook. I mean, he did exactly the same in Georgia. He's got a frozen conflict there, and Transnistria sounds like another frozen conflict started by those little green men that first invaded Ukraine and Russia knew nothing about. The other economic issue and political issue that plagues Moldova, of course, is corruption. And recently, one of the largest oligarchs from that country has been extradited from Greece. I think we've got a video that talks about him just coming up.
Moldovan business magnate Vladimir Plahotniuc, detained in Greece on a warrant linked to a $1 billion fraud case, landed in Moldova's capital, Chisinau, after being extradited. Local media reported on Thursday. Plahotniuc, a former lawmaker widely regarded as one of Moldova's richest men, is a suspect in the country's so-called theft of the century, the disappearance in 2013 of $1 billion from the Moldovan banking system, equivalent at the time to 12% of the ex-Soviet state's GDP. Before fleeing Moldova in 2019, he was the leader of the Democratic Party, part of the governing coalition from 2016 to 2019, and served as deputy speaker of parliament. According to Greek police, the defendant had lived in 22 countries since 2023. He was arrested at Athens airport after boarding a flight to Dubai, under an Interpol notice which said he held 16 passports, including from Romania, Mexico, and Russia. The oligarch denies any wrongdoing, claiming the allegations are driven by political hatred.
22 countries in 3 years, and he's done nothing wrong. I wonder, there's a lot of sightseeing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here we have an oligarch, $1 billion stolen from Moldova, which, as you just said, Moldova has a small economy. Yeah. Extremely influential. What can you tell us about that? We know he's an ex-lawmaker. We know that he's pro-Russian. How do you think Russia may be using him or wanted to use him?
I'm pretty sure that Russia could have used him just to destabilize. Like, corruption is a perfect way to destabilize a country. It can overturn elections, it can overturn court agreements, and crucially as well, if there is corruption, then people don't trust the institutions of the state, which is a really good thing for Russia. They want that. They want people to go, well, I don't trust the courts, I don't trust the parties, I don't trust the prime minister, I don't trust the president. And Russia doesn't really want people to say, I love Russia. They just want people to question the democratic values and institutions of their country. And with this oligarch, this guy, his crime, alleged crime, of course, I should say, is incredible. Siphoned off 12% of the country's GDP.
Yep.
So I am pretty sure that that Maia Sandu and the government are very happy that he has been extradited this week, just days before the general election. One of the criticisms the government has faced is that it hasn't done enough to crack down on corruption, and now it has this kind of coup.
Right.
It's got the most wanted man in Moldova, probably.
Yeah.
He's sitting in a jail now in the capital, and the government can say, or they can trumpet this achievement and say, look, OK, here is one person we have caught, and he's the biggest fish of the lot.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. You say, this is evidence that they are doing something about corruption. But are they going far enough when it comes to EU accession? What do we know about the level of satisfaction that the EU has in terms of how well Moldova is dealing with corruption in its public institutions?
The EU has... when it comes to Moldova, it's sort of good and it's bad. Like, the fight against corruption could always be quicker. The fight to campaign to improve the efficiency of the courts, things like that, they could always be better. And I think the EU has voices. And, of course, the EU has its own issues as well, like the actual appetite for getting new countries into the bloc is rather thin at the moment. Not everybody is behind getting new countries into the EU. So, yeah, Moldova has issues, but at the same time, the EU has issues with accession, and in Moldova in particular. And, of course, going back to what I said, a lot of people in the EU will say, why do we want a country coming into the EU that has Russian troops in it? It's just asking for trouble.
Right, right. Yeah, so quite a mixed bag there. Now, the election is on Sunday, and we hear from the Institute of Study of War, that there is a risk of violent protests. Is the Moldovan, other Moldovan security services, do you think, prepared to deal with this? It sounds as though, Maia Sandu is saying all the right things. She's recognising there's a hybrid war going on. She's talking about the production of drones and so on. Do you think they'll be ready for it? Will we have a reasonably fair and free election, in your opinion? Look into your crystal ball here, Matthew.
I think we will have a reasonably fair election. Of course, what happens prior to that is a question mark, because, say, if there is a sort of vote buying going on, which we're unaware of at the moment, but we might become aware of it further down the road. But the actual process of people putting little bits of paper into a ballot box, I think that will be okay. And I think we should also talk about what might happen. Apparently, Maia Sandu's party, which is a governing party, Action and Solidarity, they do have a majority at the moment, but opinion polls are showing that while they might win, they will lose the majority. Therefore, if they want to carry on governing, they have to find a coalition partner, which could be very difficult to do, considering how fractious the Moldovan political scene is. Then, therefore, they could try and govern as a minority party and just strike various agreements with other parties on a case-by-case situation.
But that would really slow things down in terms of EU accession. And
it would do, yeah.
Moving towards Europe.
And it will cause political problems, yeah. It will cause deadlocks, it will cause...
And social problems.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there, Matthew, but thank you very much for sharing that analysis.
Happy to come along. Thank you.
Pleasure. Well, we've got a report coming up, so don't tune out. We have our own Pavel Chaskovsky reporting from Moldova coming up in just a little while, so stay tuned. And, of course, we'll have live reports during the news on the hour. But from us, for the moment, goodbye.